Okay. I promise there is a good reason on why I have never covered the Boombo before. First and foremost, when it first came to the game, I was A, unimpressed by its damage, and B, not covering every new weapon that came out at the time. So I figured, okay, well, maybe if they add a sniper hero, or like a bow hero, maybe it'll make these weapons viable down the line. And it did. Stoneheart Farah made a big change. And on that note, my Stoneheart Farah is maximum supercharged, so all of the gameplay you see today will be on a Boombo that's like a little bit stronger than you might experience if yours is, max perks and everything. So that might make a slight difference, but it shouldn't be a big deal because it's my understanding that supercharged heroes don't actually buff the damage, they just buff the ability damage. Regardless, none of this is neither here nor there. My point is, I figured, okay, well, maybe I'll cover the Boombo when it comes back around, right? During the summer like it did last year. I'm recording this on Halloween, so it did not did not come back around, and it has just no word. Nobody at Epic has said anything about the Boombo. We have no idea when or if it may come back to the game, and it is currently only obtainable through a voucher, is my understanding, which this weapon is not worth one, which is why I only have one copy. So I figured, you know what? I'm just going to get it out of the way. I have no idea when this weapon is coming back around, so let's just talk about it today. First and foremost, the Boombo is kind of like a mid-tier bow. A lot of people consider it the standard because it is kind of like the basic bow. You shoot it and then it explodes things. I mean, that's kind of what they do in this game. However, there is not a single reload perk on this weapon, which is a huge deal. Every other bow in the entire game has a reload perk, and I feel personally that a reload perk is required for me to use bows because they just don't shoot fast enough. Like, your effective damage and how useful you are to the team is essentially just how many times you can shoot this weapon in a match, and how many enemies you affect while you do it. And that's why the Xenon bow is like the golden standard for bows. It affects all of the enemies that you can line up in a row, plus Farah's damage, and the reload speed is wicked on that thing. You can rattle off shots like crazy. The Boombo has a very teeny tiny explosion. It is embarrassing compared to the powder keg, and it has a very long draw time and reload speed. It's a slow weapon to use in a low effective area. It's mathematically, it's not the strongest bow. It actually does okay damage-wise, I should say. It just shoots too slow to where it's not really going to be an insanely viable weapon, although I know that there are plenty of Boombo fans out there who really like this weapon, and I will say that it's good. I'm just saying that there are better options. So, I mean, if you don't already have the weapon and you're planning on using a voucher, I will point you to the best bows video to make your decision very clear. That way we can cover all of the bows in one conversation that is outside of the scope of this video. I also talk about the Boombo a little bit in that video, which is another reason why I never made this video, was because while I didn't talk about the specific perks on the Boombo, I covered it pretty well in the best bows video, so it kind of answered a lot of questions. Now, with all of that said, if you are going to perk the Boombo, how are you going to do it? So, first and foremost, this is what I consider to be like the standard build. I don't really see another way to perk this. I would never recommend 2 crit rating perks on the same bow. On this weapon, it's kind of cute because you could do quadruple crit rating, which is silliness. That is a lot of wasted perks. A lot of people have tried to convince me that, Beast, this weapon's amazing with double crit rating, double crit damage. Just use Xenon, the what is his name? The Sub-Zero Zenith. You'll freeze enemies every time. And I'm like, that's not anything. That's not good. And basically every other YouTuber is going to recommend double crit rating, double crit damage. I will reject that philosophy and say don't do that. That is not suggested. Now, I am running a damage perk on this, and that's just to smoothen out the shots when you don't crit. I probably should recommend double crit damage crit rating, and that's because I used to run this weapon with quadruple damage, and that is just not enough. It doesn't really do a whole heck of a lot of damage per shot. You're still going to take multiple shots per big enemy, and when you're shooting into a crowd, every enemy has its own chance to crit anyway, so it's kind of just pointless to run quadruple damage. I'm saying this from experience here. It did not pan out as well as I would have hoped. I like the consistent damage on a weapon that shoots this slow. I wanted it to do a lot every time, but it's honestly doing plenty with just the crit rating. Like, it's doing a base 67,000 with the loadout that I have on right now, which is which is good enough, and it's doing okay. It's trying its hardest, everybody. It also, curiously enough, has a headshot multiplier, which I think does activate if you hit something in the head. That is most effective on like smashers and mist monsters, where that's really gonna make a difference. Or if you are absolutely insane, you can shoot through the little slit in the riot shielder's little face hole. So you can just shave his eyebrows that way, or if that's your style. But yeah, I would recommend either damage, crit damage, fire rate, or crit rating, double crit damage, fire rate. Now, I do also recommend the double crit damage in that other build, because if you're going to run this with totally rocking out, which is, I guess, suggested, it's pretty good for bows, you're going to want to do double crit damage for that. Now, I am going to future-proof this video on the off chance that they ever, square this weapon up with the rest of the other bows and give it a damn reload perk. I can't know which slot that's going to go into, but suffice it to say, if they do add a reload perk, my standard build for all bows is crit rating, crit damage, fire rate, and the reload perk. If you don't know what the fire rate does, it actually affects that draw speed, so it takes less time to draw it to maximum, and it takes less time to charge up to your hardest hit, because if you didn't notice, if you charge your bow up for a long period of time, it will do more damage. In this long drawn-out fight with a smasher, you can tell that when I draw it out for a long time, I'm critting for like 300,000 to 400,000, and if I just start spamming shots, it does about 250,000. It's not an insane difference, but if you're one-on-one versus a smasher like I am here, you're definitely going to want to, charge it to full. That said, that full charge might not crit, so I don't know if it's better to just spam as many shots as you possibly can, or charge it to full every time, because charging it to full will take more time. So you're shooting less often, doing more damage, or you're shooting faster, doing less damage. I didn't do the math on this. I'm not going to, because it totally depends on human numbers, which are never consistent. So I don't know how fast you're going to be spamming that thing. And honestly, I would just recommend doing whatever you're most comfortable with. If you feel good charging it to full, go for it. If you want to just rattle off as many shots as possible, probably good too. I don't think it matters, because the whole thing that I'm talking about here is a one-on-one versus a smasher, which you should never be doing with the boom bow. Call in a teammate, get out of there, use traps, something. A boom bow is not the tool for the job against a smasher, and it's especially not the tool for the job against healing hose, because with 2 or 3 of these girls healing each other all at the same time, I found it impossible. If I didn't get back-to-back crits or use abilities, I just had to use a Storm King's Wrath, because the boom bow was not cutting it. This is really long off my path of saying that fire rate is definitely good. It's just a direct upgrade. It does less damage than if you put a damage perk here, but you'll be shooting more often, which is kind of, it's something if we don't have a reload perk. So if you do have a reload perk, I'd recommend crit rating, crit damage, and then keep that fire rate in there. In fact, that would essentially just match my Xenon bow, which is what I've got over here. So that is kind of what it should look like, but the perks should be in a specific, in whatever order they work on the boom bow. That said, I also should mention that the element kind of doesn't matter. Mine's fire for no good reason. The gameplay shows my water copy. I change the element sometimes, and it doesn't really matter. If you want to do more damage against water enemies, use nature. I mean, if you want it to just work against everything all the time, use energy. If you're in Stonewood or Plankerton, where you're not really dealing against elemental zombies all that often, go for physical. Physical will be the strongest this weapon can be, but it will do very little damage against the elemental zombies, so if you're in Twine, that is not the right way to go. As for the 6 perk, do not supercharge this. As for the 6 perk, it doesn't really matter. We don't even have an extra damage to Slowed and Snared, to my understanding, so I do not recommend doing the damage to Afflicted, because that'll do 0 damage on your first shot, it'll do 45% extra on your second shot, and then by the 3rd shot, it would have done as much damage as if you would have just done a damage perk, and crit damage is significantly more helpful here, so it doesn't really matter. I believe it came with Affliction when it first released. I do not recommend a core re-perk for Slowed and Snared. That will not be worth it. Affliction is what you want, because even though it's a teeny little bit amount of damage, it does finish off some enemies, and I did actually have that happen a couple of times in my gameplay. So in my experience, you do at least want a little bit of extra damage. Slowed and Snared isn't really going to do anything, especially if you're running Stoneheart Pharaoh, which you should. If you don't have her, I highly recommend a hero voucher. If you like bows at all, she is a fantastic hero. You can always just dance away from the enemies, just, double jump out of the way. So Slowed and Snared is never really going to benefit you in any too crazy way. way. But that's the Boombo, everybody. I finally covered it. Are you happy now? If you guys want to support the channel, feel free to use code Mista to check out. If you guys want to become a channel member, you can do so here with the join button on the channel, link down below. You can, use those emotes down in the comments. I see you guys. I appreciate it. If you guys want to follow me on Twitch, my streams are awesome. I'd really appreciate it. We're trying to get partner over there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a nice day. And then